Hello everyone, in this video I will be recapping the chapter 52 of the Manhwa demonic evolution. The elite warrior was in shock, and while he was holding the giant axe with one hand, slowly the demon began to approach him. Upon feeling the presence of the demon, he began to sweat and wonder what had attracted the demon to them. He was quite confused because he didn't know why he hadn't been able to even slightly sense the demon's breath. He clenched his teeth tightly, activated his red core, causing it to gradually start glowing. He stared intensely into Aang's eyes and wondered how a warrior as strong as himself hadn't been able to realize that the demon was so close to him. In the blink of an eye, he let go of the axe and moved several meters away from the demon. Then, he placed his hand on the ground and using momentum, abruptly stopped his body. He asked Aang if this demon was a five-finned demon. The demon simply continued to grip the elite warrior's giant axe with one hand and stood silently without making any movement. Then, the demon activated the blue core and using the water element, began to advance quickly towards the elite warrior. The demon moved at such a high speed that it even left the giant axe floating in midair. Upon seeing this, the elite warrior was dumbfounded, and while watching as the demon approached him at great speed, he realized that this demon could use the water element. In the blink of an eye, the demon appeared in front of the elite warrior. While looking at him with a wicked smile, it began to attack him using its sharp claws. Luckily, he was able to react in time. He gained momentum and started to step back. He placed both arms in front of his face to protect himself from the demon's blows. He slightly turned his head backward, stared into Aang's eyes, and upon seeing that he had unsheathed his sword and activated the core, he realized that he was planning to ambush him by surprise. He asked Aang to pause their quarrels for now, and he also asked him for help in first defeating the demon. Aang simply smiled. While his body was emitting the same aura as the demon, he stared into the eyes of the elite warrior and asked him what pause he was talking about. He began to move his finger, and while controlling the actions of the demon, he asked the elite warrior why he believed that this demon was only attacking him. The elite warrior turned his head towards Aang, and while looking into his eyes, he was astonished and began to wonder what he was talking about. While he was distracted, the demon started to rise in the sky. Then it stared directly at the elite warrior, and with a smile spread its hands to the sides, activating the special ability of water element demons. This caused sharp icicles to appear and quickly advance towards the elite warrior. The elite warrior quickly turned his head towards the demon, and upon seeing that the icicles were approaching him with great accuracy, he began to wonder if Aang was the person who was controlling the demon. He stared into Aang's eyes and came to the conclusion that he was manipulating the demon's body through some manipulation technique. Thinking about this, he began to wonder how it was possible for a mere human to command demons. Quickly, the elite warrior crouched down, placed a hand on the ground, and activated the stone element, causing branches made of stone to emerge from the ground and surround his body to protect him from the demon's attack. He clenched his teeth tightly, started staring into Aang's eyes, and wondered how much power he was hiding. The demon extended its hands towards the elite warrior, causing all the icicle projectiles to quickly advance towards him. Luckily, he was able to protect himself from this attack thanks to the barrier he had created using rocks. Aang stared at him fixedly in the eyes, and upon seeing that he had been able to block the demon's attack, he thought that he had some skill. He also thought it was not surprising that he was a warrior hired by a powerful family. The elite warrior stood up, clenched his teeth tightly, and with a murderous look he began to gaze towards the demon. Then he reached out his hand towards the giant axe. Little by little, the rocks that were stuck to the blade of the giant axe began to come off and fall to the ground, making it much lighter than before. At that moment, the axe started emanating the same aura as the elite warrior, and slowly began to rise into the sky. In a blink of an eye, the giant axe started spinning at high speed and quickly advanced towards the distracted demon. In an instant, the giant axe appeared behind the demon's back and swiftly moved towards it at great speed. But at that moment, the demon abruptly moved its body, avoiding being cut by the giant axe. After dodging the attack, the demon began to smile while staring directly into the elite warrior's eyes. The elite warrior reached out his hand towards the giant axe and grabbed it by its handle. Due to energy conservation, he stepped back several meters. With a murderous look in his eyes, he started to stare fixedly at the demon. He was quite surprised because in order to accelerate its movement, he had deactivated the giant axe mode. Yet still, the demon had been able to dodge the attack as if nothing had happened. He slightly turned his head back, and upon seeing that Aang's body was emitting the same aura as the demon, he concluded that the demon had been able to dodge the attack because Aang was manipulating it. Aang unsheathed his sword, and while his body emitted a demonic aura with a murderous look, he stared into the elite warrior's eyes and slowly began to advance towards him. The elite warrior started wondering what ability Aang was using to control the demon, and also if he was a six-finned warrior. The demon activated the water element again and began to advance quickly towards the elite warrior. Upon seeing this, he decided not to stand idly by, so he gained momentum and also started advancing rapidly towards the demon. But at that moment, a branch emerged from the ground and caught the elite warrior's leg, causing him to stop moving forward. He became confused, and as he looked down, he saw how a branch controlled by a green core warrior began to wrap around his foot. He started wondering who had used the wood element to disturb his body posture. The demon took advantage of the distracted elite warrior. It gained momentum, made a big jump, and started moving quickly towards him. Using all its strength, the demon struck the elite warrior with his sharp claws. He was able to react at the last second and blocked the attack using his axe. The demon's attack had been so powerful that it even destroyed the ground into pieces. Because he had stopped the attack, the elite warrior began to bleed from his mouth. He clenched his teeth tightly, and while he was looking at the demon with a murderous gaze, he thought that if this demon was only a five-finned demon, then it should not be an opponent for such a strong warrior. He came to the conclusion that he was in trouble since Aang had made the demon attack him by surprise. At the same time, while the elite warrior and the demon were fighting, the blonde woman turned her head towards Other, and as she looked into his eyes, she panicked and advised him to go take care of the demon first. While he was holding her by the shoulders, he looked towards the elite warrior and, upon seeing him fighting the demon, he got nervous and ordered the blonde woman to go fight the demon. She reached out her hand towards the demon and explained to Other that she wasn't good at fighting because she was only a healer. She also added that she had to keep an eye on Sidu Liu so that she wouldn't escape. While they were talking, Sidu Liu activated the green core, looked at her hand, and saw that slowly she was able to move it. Other extended his hand towards the demon, looked into the blonde woman's eyes, and asked her why she was so scared of a simple warrior. He also added that now, because of the demon, he was going to fail in the mission and neither the elite warrior nor she would receive a penny. The blonde woman stared directly into Other's eyes and tried to convince him. But just before she could finish speaking, Sidu Liu appeared. She activated the green core and with momentum, stabbed the blonde woman in the back with a knife, causing her to start writhing in pain. Upon seeing this, Other became terrified as he watched drops of blood from the blonde woman fall onto Sidu Liu's face. She explained that she felt sorry for her since as a warrior, she should fight with all her strength and not let herself be defeated by men. The blonde woman slightly turned her head back and tried to move her body, but she realized that Sidu Liu had used paralysis. She looked into Sidu Liu's eyes and asked her how she had freed herself from the paralysis. While she was stabbing the knife into the back of the blonde woman using both hands, she stared into her eyes and explained that she was a green core healing warrior, so she knew in depth about the healing and recovery system. Little by little, the blonde woman began to close her eyes, and the last thing she thought was that Sidu Liu was a genius at using recovery. She pulled the knife out of the blonde woman's body, causing her to fall to the ground. While holding the knife in one hand, she stared at the blonde woman and called her despicable, explaining that now it was her turn. She revealed to Other that she had avoided damaging vital organs of the blonde woman, so now survival depended entirely on her. After saying this, she began to stare at Other fixedly in the eyes and revealed to him that he did not await the same fate. Upon hearing this, Other clenched his teeth tightly, and while looking her in the eyes, he also clenched his fist tightly and asked her how dare she attack them by surprise. He also asked her how a mere one-finned warrior dared to carry out stealth attacks from behind. He also added that although he couldn't deal with demons, a one-finned warrior like her was no match for him. He suggested to her not to fight as she would only be seeking death. Sidu Liu began walking towards him, placing a hand on her chest. While staring directly into his eyes, she noticed that Other had irregular breathing and an inexperienced posture, so she revealed to him that she knew he had no combat experience. She also added that he was only the type of 5-core warrior who had been forced to emerge thanks to family resources in order to add prestige to the family. Other clenched his fist tightly and while looking into her eyes, called her an arrogant girl. While Sidu Liu's body was emanating a murderous aura, she looked at him with a penetrating gaze and explained that people like him only tarnish the reputation of warriors. Upon hearing this, Other clenched his teeth tightly. With a murderous look in his eyes, he began to stare at her intensely and started insulting her by calling her a spoiled whore. He began to wonder how this foul-smelling woman knew that he had no combat experience. During the last 10 years, his father had always hired the most powerful warriors to help him forcefully carry his core. The process had been extremely painful, as every time this happened, he became incontinent. But in the end, thanks to being under the protection of those warriors, he had managed to reach the same level as a 5-core warrior. For the trip to the Castle of Bones, Other's father had spent a large amount of money to hire an elite warrior as his escort, and he had also assigned a 3-core healer. He thought that if no one had interfered, then he could have obtained the crystal element effortlessly. He began to get angry since now the whole plan had been ruined because of Aang and Sidu Liu. While the elite warrior and the 5-fin demon were fighting, Other caught his attention and asked him what he was doing. He also ordered him to come to him to protect him from Sidu Liu. He also reminded him that his father had paid a lot of money for him to protect him. After saying this, Other ordered him to come here right now and protect him. At that moment, Aang activated the wood element, causing branches to emerge from the ground and attack the elite warrior. Luckily, he was able to dodge the attack at the last second, although in the process he received some small cuts on his face. While he was bleeding from the cuts, Other gave him the order to come to him and take care of Sidu Liu. Upon hearing this, his patience began to slowly run out. He slightly turned his head towards him, and while looking into his eyes with a furious gaze, he called him a piece of trash and ordered him to shut up. He also called Other a waste who only knew how to play with women and was incapable of fighting a finless demon. Upon hearing this, Other's expression drastically changed as he looked at the elite warrior. He pointed his finger at him and began to tremble, wondering what was happening. He became furious and told the elite warrior that trash like him had no right to insult someone as important as himself. While he was distracted, Sidu Liu started approaching him and asked him to stop talking nonsense since the only trash here was himself, someone who only approached women using his family's reputation and money. Although at first, Other was somewhat confused, several seconds later he became furious and activated the blue core. While he was staring at Sidu Liu with an aggressive look, he explained to her that trash like her had no right to mock him. He pulled out a knife, and just before he could finish speaking, Sidu Liu activated the green core and in the blink of an eye appeared behind him. She had moved at such a high speed that he hadn't even been able to sense her presence. Sidu Liu took advantage of him being distracted, and using all her strength she stabbed him in the ribs, causing him immense pain. He slightly turned his head towards her, and while they were looking into each other's eyes, he began to wonder how a warrior from a single fin core could be so fast. Using the knife, he tried to attack Sidu Liu, but just before his attack could reach her, she gained momentum and in the blink of an eye moved several meters away from him. Other placed a hand on his head, clenched his teeth tightly, and as his eyes turned white, he began to scream due to experiencing a terrible headache. Sidu Liu started looking into his eyes and realized that he had never known how to use the energy. She thought that if Other now activated the terrifying energy of the 5-fin core recklessly, something bad was going to happen. Some time ago, the professor had explained to them that if a warrior was consumed by the core's energy, they would become uncontrollable. He advised them that if they ever came across this type of warrior, then they should immediately move away. He also added that the loss of control over the warriors' bodies would be incalculable, and he also added that if there was an accident, it would be very serious. He pointed at himself with his finger, and while staring them directly in the eyes, he explained that if they ever encountered a negative energetic reaction, then they should immediately calm down and regain control of their energy so that the core could return to its usual course of operation. Otherwise, the violent energy would eventually lead to self-destruction. Remembering the professor's words, Sidu Liu smiled, and as she stared fixedly at Other's core, she thought that if this was the case, then it was a perfect ending for someone like him. She gathered momentum and began moving quickly towards Other. This is the end of the video. If you guys want to see the next part, then don't forget to subscribe and like the video.